We have these before and after pictures of you. Was there any space, or are there any spaces where you grieve your old self?
Yes, very much. I look back and I wish I would have been nicer to her. I wish that I would have talked to her better. I wish that I would have focused on taking care of her. And I think about how I should have focused my attention on the fact that I loved her so much that I wanted to take better care of her.
My father died on June 20th, 2018. I was 37 years old, and suddenly everything I knew about myself was uprooted. I had so many questions, and there were so many layers to peel back. Who was my daddy? And who am I as a result? What was his legacy? And what will mine be? My mantra for 2019 was happy, healthy, whole. I was determined to face my grief and heal. And my girls were there with me every single step of the way. I found strength in my vulnerability, and we had open, honest, transparent conversations. And that's what we're going to do here in this space. So grab your journal, light some candles, pour a glass of wine, and get cozy. I'm Charity Bailey, and girl, we need to talk. We carry stress and grief in our bodies, whether we know it or not. And all of us internalize it different. Some of us binge eat. Some of us eat emotionally. Some of us just shut down completely, which in turn ends in weight gain. My guest coming up is Christie Payne, and she lost 100 pounds, actually over 100 pounds, over the course of a few years. And she's going to tell us all about it and what her journey was like. Hey, Christie, welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Yes, 100 pounds. That's a lot of weight to drop.
Yep.
How does it feel?
Light. No, honestly, it feels amazing. It's actually about 110.
Yes.
And that 10 pounds makes a difference, right?
Yes, it does.
No, but I always joke that it feels like I've lost another person essentially, or a small person anyway, right? So it feels really good. It's empowering, and I feel strong.
Yeah, and that's the important part, because I know so many times when we lose weight, it's all about, hey, girl, you look so good. But you mentioned that it feels empowering, it feels strong. So what was your aha moment? What was the moment where you went, you know what, enough of this. I got to get this off.
So it's funny because it didn't just happen in one full swoop. It was sort of in a phased type approach. So the first thing is after grad school, I put on a ton of weight, got married and just sort of, got complacent. And then from there, I was doing some work for a celebrity, and I was going to be taking a trip. And I thought, oh my gosh, I cannot be on a beach with this supermodel, essentially, looking the way I did and feeling the way I did. And so that's sort of what started it, right? It was more about the vanity. It was more about, I didn't want to be around all these beautiful women and feel less than. So that's sort of how it started. But over the course of the year, essentially, my mentality really shifted, and it became more about feeling better about myself, both physically and emotionally, and really identifying those things that pushed me to go down those old habits, right? Mm-hmm. The trauma and the grief and all of those things that, even stress that would lead me down that path. And so it was really a transformation. It was a mindset shift. And so it wasn't just one time. There was a course of a few different things throughout that journey that really started it, but that was the first reason.
So I heard you say you didn't want to go on the beach with a supermodel and all these beautiful women. So first of all, plus size women are beautiful, and we know that.
Amen.
But also
society tells me otherwise.
Yes. So what is that thing that makes us compare ourselves to everybody else, especially as women?
It's a good question, because I never used to feel like I was that girl, right? Like I never really looked at other women and felt like I didn't measure up or anything like that. That actually came later in life for me. And I think when I started doing work in the beauty industry is really when I started to sort of compare myself to what I saw on social media, what I saw, on TV and, around these influential people, right?
Yeah.
And that's where my mindset really started to change. And I sort of had to take a step back and remind myself that, I am enough whether I'm
Yeah.
a size 24 or a size 12, it doesn't matter. I'm still the same person. But society really does some interesting things to validate women, especially
Mm-hmm.
as they go through their weight loss journey, right? So the attention that I would get more as time went on and the more weight that I lost, those were things that I started to notice. And then that's when I started to think, I don't want to be a part of that, right? Like, I
Yeah.
want to celebrate us as women in all various stages of our lives, whether that's heavy or thin or, you know, going through something or not, right? We have to celebrate our milestones and our different moments. So,
Yeah. Well, I know the moment. So whether folks know it or not, you and I are really good friends. We used to be
yes.
neighbors. And I just remember you said, I'm going to the CrossFit gym. You should come with me. And I was like, girl. But the CrossFit gym really became your sanctuary.
Yeah.
So what was that like? What was it like to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and then actually get there and do it?
So, because of this trip that I had coming up, right? I was scrolling through Facebook, feeling really depressed and, kind of down about myself. And I came across this Facebook ad for this CrossFit gym. And I'm someone who I tend to do things kind of the extreme, right? And I thought, oh, it's a 6-week program. I can do 6 weeks and lose a ton of weight and I'm going to look amazing. And like, this was like my unrealistic expectation, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I put on myself. And I had to step back and remind myself that I looked amazing regardless, but that's a whole nother discussion. So I ended up going because I thought, this would be a quick fix, right? I could drop some weight real quick and maybe feel a little bit better about my situation. I walked in to CFNS and I have never felt so welcomed in a place like that ever before. CrossFit has this sort of I don't really know what to call it. There's this like unrealistic
There's a stigma to it because
there, yeah, exactly.
I was a part of a CrossFit gym for a while, and it's nothing like that. I think
Right.
because everyone is so fit and going so hard
Yeah.
that you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to walk in here and I'm going to be the weakest link. I'm going to be the most overweight. And it's
Mhm.
just really intimidating, really, right?
Exactly. That's the perfect word for it. It's very intimidating. When I walked in and I met with the manager, Neil and Shane, they were both so open to me joining, right? They didn't look at me as an almost 300-pound woman who was probably in the worst shape of my life, right? They
Mm-hmm.
never thought, oh, I can't do this. And so when we talked about the program and we talked about everything, I was about to leave and Neil said, so I'll see you tomorrow. And I said, do you really think I can do this? And he said, of course, why not? And that's really what it came down to, is that he believed that I could. So therefore I believed that I could.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard. It was so hard, but you're right. It became my sanctuary. It became a place where when, my best friend, she unfortunately lost her father last year. And on that day, I knew that there wasn't much that I could say to, be there for her and support her. And I was carrying that. And I found myself at the gym, and I didn't know where else to go. And that's where I ended up. And so I think that really has become a testament to that is my sanctuary. It's where I find my peace. It's where I work out my frustrations and it's where I reduce my stress. So it's been a lifesaver for me.
Well, it sounds like it, especially because you mentioned that you went there instead of turning to food or alcohol
Mm-hmm.
and that type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Yeah. Because typically
Yeah.
that's the first thing we do. Come on, girl, let's go get a
Yep.
drink. And then one
Yep.
turns to 3 or a bottle, or,
Yep. Little something sweet, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about your gym experience, though, because it wasn't just that. Clearly, you had to change your eating as well. So what
Right.
was the plan like?
So it's funny because originally I'd started with the same food plan that at the time that the nutritionist I was working with suggested. And over the course of the year, I lost 35 pounds, which for a lot of people that's a great accomplishment. And I don't want to discount that, right? But for me, I was really frustrated because being a heavier person doing the extreme workouts that I was doing and monitoring my food as closely as I was, I felt like it should have been more. And I say that because, I could stop drinking soda and drop 20 pounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually did a lot of research, and I decided to kind of argue with my nutritionist. And I asked about doing keto instead. And at the time, they were very much against it. They didn't really know a lot about it. And so we kind of were at a little bit of a crossroad, but I did it anyway. And then it turns out that now they're on board, but that's a whole nother discussion. But I lost 75 pounds in 9 months just changing my diet. And so for me, it was really more about getting active, figuring it out, making it a routine, really focusing on the things that made my body feel good, not so much about making my body look good, right? And then from there, I just noticed that those foods made me feel better. So that's really what started the diet component. And I also felt like it's so worthless almost to kill myself in the gym and then go out and have a couple glasses of wine and dessert, and I just felt like I was undoing all that hard work, and then I didn't feel good. So it just sort of got back to basics in that way.
But everything in moderation, right? You still have the treat here and some drinks there. I'm like, let's be clear, we friends.
Yeah. No, I don't want to make it. I am not perfect in any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, COVID has really kind of, it's funny when you talk about depression and you talk about anxiety and you talk about trauma, I'd never really felt like I experienced a lot of those things. But I do have severe ADHD, and those symptoms can kind of come up as sort of like anxiety and depression like. And so it's funny with COVID, I noticed that my diet sort of started to slip. And then the next thing you know, everything felt off. And so it's really about getting back to the basics and balance. But yes, moderation is important.
Well, you mentioned COVID and everybody talks about the quarantine 15. So how are you doing with that? Like especially because the gyms are closed.
Yeah. So complete denial. First was my first portion of that. I was doing Zoom workouts, which my gym was really great about having the video ones, and that was great. But in the desert, it gets a little hot. So after our second shutdown, I shut down with it, and that was really hard. I say complete denial because I didn't get on the scale. I refused. Mainly because I felt like I didn't want that number to define me, and I didn't want that number to define my progress, right? Because I know how I am, and if I would have got on that scale and I would have seen a number that, impacted me emotionally, then I could have spiraled. And so some people say, oh, well, you probably shouldn't avoid because you're avoiding. And I said, no, I'm controlling my parameters, right? I'm setting my boundaries. I know that I need to do the right things, and that's what I'm working on, but I'm not going to give the scale that power because it doesn't deserve it.
And I know I am connected to it as well. And it's just the thing. You're like, oh my gosh. And it's so hard to mentally disconnect from the scale, especially during weight loss, because you're doing a program like CrossFit where you're building all this muscle. So sometimes you're not losing weight, you're gaining muscle and trimming out, but the scale, boy, that scale, the number on that scale, just like the number in those jeans, like it has such a hold on us. So walk me through the process, because we have pictures of you at 50 pounds, at 75 pounds, at 100 pounds. What were you feeling during each of those milestones?
It's funny because once I hit that 50-pound mark, I was ecstatic and I felt strong. And then I started to say, what's next? How much more can I do? Right. And so it sort of became, I would say, a healthy obsession, right? Like I wanted to see where I could push my body, not from a weight loss perspective, but from a movement perspective, from a strength perspective. How much could I deadlift? How much could I,
So setting
can
new
I do a
goals.
pull-up? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All of those things, right? So that sort of started the process. And then once I hit that 75-pound mark, I felt like, wow, I feel really comfortable in my skin. I feel like this is a great spot for me. So even if I stayed at that weight, it may have been considered heavy from a society perspective, right? Because I'm naturally a larger woman anyway. But what was funny to me is I was like, I feel really good here. And then I hit that 100-pound mark, and it was like, it was like a release, right?
Yeah.
Like it sounds crazy, but
Exactly.
I was like, oh, right? Like,
and
I made it, right? But it's so funny because that's when I really started to think about the fact that my value isn't determined by the circumference of my waistline, right?
Ooh, that's good, girl.
And thank you.
Yeah.
But it's true because I think about my grandpa, right? He's passed, but when I started my journey, he was still living, and he kept telling me, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And I know he was, because he wanted me to be healthy, right? But he came from a generation where the smaller you were, the more valuable you were.
Yeah.
And it really started to make me think about what kind of pressure we put on ourselves. And I didn't want to be a part of that, right? So when people tell me, oh, you look great, I always respond with, well, I feel incredible.
Yeah.
Or, things like that, because I want to shift the focus on the appearance and more about what it's doing for me internally.
So while we're talking about shifting focus, a lot of folks know, because I share openly as you do, that I had the gastric sleeve surgery back in May of 2020. And so at this point, I've lost about 70 pounds. My highest weight was 372, and I'm clocking right around 301. So I'm like, as soon as I get under that 290, hey. But I noticed that when people tell me like, oh, you look great, I divert. Like I shift the conversation. And I'm trying to be mindful about it. And it's because I've always gotten a lot of attention from men, from people in general. You're beautiful, yada, yada. But it's just something about, I feel myself shrink when folks tell me how great I look, instead of just owning it and saying thank you and moving on. What is that?
It's interesting. I have a perspective about it. So I actually wrote a blog post about something similar, right? And it was about just say thank you. And I don't know if it's culturally, I don't know what the root is, but for me, I grew up in the Midwest, right? And one of the things I was always taught was to be modest. I was always also taught that it's important to be smart. I never thought, and this isn't a dig at my parents or my family or anything like that, but I always made this correlation that you're either pretty or you're smart, right?
Oh,
and
you can't be both.
It's messed up. It's messed up, right? That's in my head thing, right? Lots of therapy to work through this stuff, right?
Yeah, I got you.
But essentially what would happen is when people would make comments about my appearance, I would diminish that because I wanted people to make comments about my intelligence or my work ethic or, all of those things. And so I would diminish it on my own, and I would get uncomfortable about it. And then now that I've been kind of going through this journey, and people, they make comments about my size because it's drastically different. Right. And I think there's still this piece of almost insecurity around it, because I don't want people to focus on my outward appearance. I want people to focus on who I am as a person. But I have to remember that I have to separate that, right? Because I can be both. I can be smart and I can be beautiful.
Yeah, and you can't be fly. And also, let's be honest, it does feel good for folks to recognize what you've conquered, because it's been, in the making. It's been a goal, so not that you're looking for validation, but the recognition of like, I see you, girl, And so I think some of that is finding the balance there too, right? Because
and just recognizing the work that went into it, right? That's so, and I love that you said that, because that is so important.
So we're talking about grief, right? And we have these before and after pictures of you. Was there any space, or are there any spaces where you grieve your old self?
Yes, very much. but in a strange way. And I say that because I used to be so mean to her. I looked,
Ooh.
I was,
Mm-hmm.
and I never really realized how mean I was to her. Right.
Child, that
I,
self-talk is a
yeah.
beast. And we judge other folks the way we judge ourselves. When I recognize that, I'm like, I'm not
Mhm.
even judging you. I'm judging me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's really where it came in, is that I look back and I wish I would have been nicer to her. Because
Mm,
she dealt with a lot of stuff, right? She
mm-hmm.
dealt with some challenging relationship stuff. She dealt with losing, grandparents and people close to her, and all while going to grad school and trying to be a wife and all of that too, right? And a friend. And so I grieve that part of it. I wish that I would have talked to her better. I wish that I would
Mm.
have focused on taking care of her. And that's the other piece of it, is that I did it for all the wrong reasons to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And I think about how I should I should have focused my attention on the fact that I loved her so much that I wanted to take
Yes.
better care of her.
Mm-hmm.
And why I started the journey wasn't because I loved her, it was because I didn't like her.
Right.
And I didn't and
Right.
I don't like that, right? That's
Yeah.
the part I wish I would have done better.
A big part of this chapter in my life is about honoring my body.
Yes.
And so when you said that, it makes me tear up because that is that is so real. It's like, am I doing this because I love you? Or am I doing this because I hate you?
Yep.
And am I projecting out into the world on other people this perfection and confidence because I have to, because it's my survival mechanism? Do I expect things from other people, or it's a whole thing? And I don't think that people really understand it. I'm gonna
Mhm.
step away for just a second here because I think this is important. Right after I had my surgery, my little sister was here with me,
Mhm.
and I was sitting at the table trying to figure out this new eating situation because I can eat like that much. We talk about it often. And
Right.
folks see me online working out and oh, you look great. You're so strong. And I'm like, first of all, I can do anything for 15 seconds. Let's be very clear. I'm over here dying in the kitchen. That's first. Second, second, there's a lot that people don't see, right? And it's
Mhm.
everything. It's the self-talk. It's the mirror. You have a blog post about the mirror.
Yep.
But I was sitting here at the table trying to get food down like during week 1. And I said, and Libby asked me, she said, well, what? And this picture is we have it and we'll put it up. But this picture was at my birthday party. My sisters had it made. They blew it up. And I said, I liked her.
Mhm.
I liked her. And she goes, what do you mean? What did you like about her? And I said, she was sure of what she
Yep.
wanted, what she was doing. And that was December. So I had already been going through the process, the doctor's appointments, the therapy, the this, the that, and grieving my dad. And this because we've had the conversation before, is what brought me to this next step in weight loss. Some of it is the health part of it and like wanting to live a long, healthy life. The other part of it was like, what do I want for my life moving forward?
Yes.
And listen, I think I'm a baddie. Like at 372, I was still clocking it.
Hey.
Let's be very clear, right? But at 301, I get up off the couch and my knees don't hurt, sis, and my
Yeah.
back don't hurt. And
Mhm.
this shirt I couldn't wear 3 months ago. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? It's like all of those little things. And then I grieve some of the food that I used to be able to eat. I love wine and I got a wine bar on both sides of me.
Yeah.
I can't drink it.
Yep.
But at the same time, when I wake up in the morning, you talked about feeling good. I
Mhm.
feel good. I can roll over in my bed and not like struggle and huff and puff.
Mhm.
And it's all of those things that make the decision worth it. So yes, I
Yes.
still have the nausea and I still have these things, but again, now my tailbone hurts because the chiropractor said that I was putting too much weight on it and now it's trying to shift, but it's not aching and I can walk my dog. You feel me?
Right. Yep.
And so it's a whole thing, and I'm not sure that people really understand. And you mentioned COVID, and now I can't drink, I can't eat. It's just me,
Mhm.
right? I I have to face the issues straight on,
Yep.
and I think that that's another element. And so
It
I'm
the mental component is a huge part of it, right? Like, and that goes to show there are so many times, even in my life, right, over the last probably 15 years, I've gained and lost probably 40, 50 pounds at a time, right? Never anything as significant as this. But the point is that I never did the work internally, right? I never did the mental piece until
Mm,
now. And that's the part where you're talking about, is where you can't sit and eat in your feelings or drink in your feelings, right? You've got to address it. You've got to sit with it. You've got to hold space for it. And
mhm,
I think that's what makes it lasting. That's what a big part of the difference is. And the other thing is, you talked about being, having all this pain and all these other struggles, right? I felt like a prisoner in my own body for
that
a
part.
long time,
That
right?
part.
I
Yes.
mean, I sat on a
Yes.
plane next to a man who, you know, basically sent a horrible text message to someone about the 400-pound, 7-foot Amazon woman who he was sitting next to on a small propeller plane, right? I had seen that text message, as I'm going home to say my final goodbyes to my grandmother. And, having a stranger say something about me unbeknownst, he doesn't know that I know that, right?
Hmm.
But the point is like that, and that was during my journey. That's when I had already started. And so
Hmm.
there was
You're
still like
like, you don't know what I've been through to even get
right,
here, to even be able to
right,
clamp this seatbelt. I think that was the
right.
post where you were talking about being able to clamp the seatbelt and you were so proud of yourself. And
Yeah.
then here he comes and boom.
Yep. And I felt like saying, first of all, I'm not 400 pounds. At that time, I think I was like 256 or something. And I was like,
And thank you
yes,
and respect my 256.
I
And just because
wasn't.
you short, don't talk about me and my fine tall self.
But my point is, like, I felt like there were so many times I felt like a prisoner in my own body.
Yeah.
And now there's this certain level of freedom. But it's interesting because there's also pieces of me where, and I don't know if you've experienced this or if you will, and I'm not sure, but for me, I also got to a point where I became very critical of the body that I have now, right? Where I never used to look at my body the way at 297 pounds, I never looked at her with such a critical eye as
Hmm.
I did probably 6 months ago. And I'm
Yep.
really working on that, right?
That's the
Because
honor piece. Because you're
yes.
correct. So my arms filled out before, and I never had a problem showing my arms. I'm like
Yep.
arms out all the time. They were nice and full and luscious and cocoa buttered and shea buttered up, right? Now I'm like, oh my God, they said no. I
Mm-mm.
try to make it a point to nip it in the bud, like
Yes.
right where it's at. No. And
No.
I wrote in my journal once, I like the soul of the woman that I see in the mirror now.
Yes.
And so
I
you
love
talk,
that.
yeah, and you talk about body image and self-esteem and even the mirror in your blog post. So if there was one thing you could say to your former self, what would it be?
Keep going. You're worth it. I think those are the things that, we get caught up in the moment, right? And I feel like I used to wonder how I allowed myself to get to that point,
Yes, that is a
right?
very real thought. Hmm.
Right.
My
But
before and
now I'm like,
after. Yeah. I'm like,
yeah,
how, I did not know I had a beer belly and a this and a that. I literally
right?
text producer Aaron and a few of my other friends who are my former producers. And I'm like, how did I even let myself get here? And they immediately too said, hey,
It
no,
doesn't matter, right?
we're
Like,
here now.
right. And we think about all of the things up until that point, the things that we've gone through in our lives, right? The journeys that we've had, the struggles, the wins, there's so many things, right? It's not always bad. But the point is it doesn't matter what got me to that point. That's not a failure,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just a realization that I deserve to feel good. I deserve to be happy. And I got to do the work to get to a point where I can feel as good on the outside as I do on the inside.
Okay. And we're about to wrap up, but when you're talking about all of this defeats, let's talk about victories,
Ah,
non-scale victories, because we be on the scale bugging about what it says, like even now I've lost 70 pounds and there's still a pair of jeans that are still like, oh, these are still snug, but I got booty and hips and thighs.
Hey.
They ain't going nowhere.
Mm-mm.
But non-scale victory. So for me, I'll go first. So there's a chair that I couldn't fit in right before my surgery. It's one of those, I don't know, flip back camping chairs. I can fit in it now. My
Nice.
necklaces don't have clips on them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly I can walk further and jump a little bit higher, and my back and knees and all those things don't hurt. So what were some of your non-scale victories?
So there was a couple big ones. First one was buying straight size jeans. And I know that sounds crazy, but there was just something about being able to buy a size 14 and be like, I don't have to like go to specialty stores anymore, right? Like I can buy things in non-specialty stores. So that was one for me. I think the other big non-scale victory, like you talking about the chair, I don't look for chairs without arms anymore. When I would go out to dinner or go places, I would always look for chairs that didn't have arms in them because I too am very hippie, right? I got booty and hip too.
Yes, sis, we know. Yeah, I caught that. I was in the bank the other day and they said, oh, have a seat. And I went to turn around and without thinking about it, I was like, oh, I can fit in that chair.
You just sit. You could just sit. It's so like those kinds of things. The other one was buckling the seatbelt on, not only buckling it, but I had inches. Like I was inches. Like, hey, I got a picture to prove it. I had like, you could like roll that thing 3 times, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was those are the things that I didn't realize how trapped I was in my own body until those non-scale victories happened. And then of course in the gym, lifting weights, right?
Yeah.
And
throwing them weights around.
yeah. Like, when you think about losing 100 pounds, and then, so one of my trainers actually suggested that I put 100 pounds of weight on a weight vest and I go for a run. I don't run, first of all. Like, let me make that very clear. I'm not a runner. Okay. Yeah. But I thought about that. And I think I want to do that. Maybe not run, but walk, right? Do a 400 walk or something to just feel again what it felt like to have that much weight on my body, that I don't have to carry that around with me anymore. Yeah. And that piece is really empowering.
So what do you hope that women take away from our conversation today?
I hope that women take away the fact that you are beautiful no matter what size you are, that society tells us lies all the time about our beauty standards. And we get wrapped up in that. And it's important to take a step back and realize that if you are happy and you feel good in the skin that you're in, that your weight is not important. If you do feel though that you need to feel better, that, weight loss is an option for you, do it however is going to work for you. I know, Charity, you and I have talked about this before, right? People have always come up to me and said, oh, I'm so proud of you for doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And that bothers me because there is no right way, right? It's what's right for the person. And whether it's, surgery or it's, extensive exercise or different diet changes or restrictions or whatever, right? It's what matters to you as an individual that's going to work for you and that's going to help you feel your whole best self. Whether that's 400 pounds, 200 pounds, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's what's important.
Or 125, because that's the other thing that people say, don't get too skinny. Get out of my body.
Somebody says, oh my gosh, she needs to eat a cheeseburger. You don't know what she's dealing with. You don't know if she's struggled being thin her whole life. Like,
or that she's going through hormonal changes, or that she may or may not have just miscarried. We go through so much with our bodies, which is why this episode is titled Battling Our Bodies. And folks just think that it's all about the appearance and the weight that you see. But some women have endometriosis and fibroids, and there's just, we could talk about this forever.
Yes, we could.
All right, my friend. So we've had a very important conversation, and I just appreciate you for being so transparent and being such a good support system to me as I figure out this weight loss as well.
Ditto. And thanks for always being my cheerleader, and thanks for always encouraging me. And I'm so grateful to call you a friend. I really am. And I hope I showed up well for you today.
Yes, of course. Of
This is
course.
so
You showed up as you. And so on that note, that's what we're going to toast to. To every woman finding her strength, honoring her body, her heart, her mind, and her soul, and loving what she sees in the mirror, regardless to her size.
cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to that.
On the next Girl We Need to Talk, how do we let the folks in our life know that, hey, I need a break, I need a timeout?
Mm-hmm. By doing just that, by saying, hey, I need a break, I need a timeout. I think a lot of times we think that we can't set boundaries with our loved ones, because if I set boundaries with my loved ones, then that must mean that they're not my loved ones, or I'm mad at them, or no, that just means that I'm putting myself first.
Thank you for watching Girl We Need to Talk. You can find me across all social media platforms at Miss Charity Bailey. Make sure you like and subscribe.